In today's show, we discuss simulation theory. Is the Matrix film closer to reality than we realize?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasula, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell? That's all the enthusiasm I can drag up today, I'm afraid.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Well,
I
I'm
sometimes
enthusiastic.
feel like Marvin, the paranoid android from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't talk to me about life.
Oh dear. Well, I'm happy. I'll carry your enthusiasm. Hello, audience. Welcome again to the show.
I'm so glad one of us is enthusiastic. I'm enthusiastic about the show. It's just about life that I'm not so sure.
Oh dear. So this topic is not going to, what's the word I'm looking for? Push your buttons and get you going. But for me, it does. I mean, because this topic today is simulation theory, although that sounds a bit weird. It's basically talking about the Matrix film. We've obviously heard of that film, but is it actually closer to reality than we realize? Now, I don't know if you want to kick this off, or do you want me to start? It's totally up to you, Tyler.
Well, your enthusiasm has failed to wash over me. So why don't you kickstart this and try and infuse our audience with your youthful, boyish exuberance?
Well, I mean, the question is, obviously, a lot of people are aware of the film, The Matrix, where if you've not seen it, gosh, where have you been? I mean, the film basically talks about the possibility that we are not living in a real reality. We are actually part of a simulation in the grand scale of things. And I tend to think that there's more probability to that than we give it credit for. Rather than us thinking this is all real, I think we could be in a simulation environment. And that's my personal view. But do you want to answer? Well, I'll give my reasons in a minute, but what's your view?
The trouble is, you humans I've gone back to my old habit of thinking of myself as being not quite like the rest of you. You people, your use of language is actually pretty. It's either you don't care or you're unaware of something. It's when simulation. It means that somebody is simulating. Now, that is entirely different from saying a virtual reality. Now, so a simulation is that someone is manipulating us for that someone's purposes. We are programmed, if you like, just as you would in a computer simulation, with certain properties and abilities. Our interactions may or may not be based on random or as random as possible events, so that the simulator can sit back and observe what happens. That's pretty far-fetched. Well, I differentiate that from a virtual reality, which is what I believe in, because I believe in reincarnation. I think every single episode now, I say I believe in reincarnation. People must get fed up with it. But being a believer in reincarnation, obviously I don't believe that this world is the real world. This is not where we really belong, if you like. So from that point of view, I see this as a virtual world, but not as a simulation. I don't believe that I or you or anyone else is a mere automaton without free will, without capability of self-motivation. That's why I think, I don't know, do you guys really mean simulation? Because the final outcome of that is that you have no agency of your own.
Right. So yeah, you saying that simulation means that. I don't see it as that. I actually see it more akin to what you're actually defining it as a virtual environment. Because let me give you the scenario, right? Our consciousness is the only thing that exists in the real world. Everything else is a fabrication. Now, the simulated world is like a computer game, but a very, very, very powerful game where you're the character in the game. But you, like now, if somebody's on an Xbox or a PlayStation, they're playing from outside the Xbox, they're playing their character in the game. They control the character in the game that does all sorts of things in the game. But the consciousness lives outside of the game. It's playing the character in the game.
I see.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's interesting.
But the consciousness is not, it's in the game, but doesn't actually exist in the game. It's like a conduit to the character.
That is actually very interesting because that addresses some of my issues, but I'm just uncomfortable with the word simulation. Because I think you're taking your simulation from the simulations of the game world, like, sim, like the sim game. The sim game, which is obviously sim is short for simulation.
That's right.
Yes, that's where you're taking it from. And even though you say you are comparing what I'm talking about, a virtual reality, and you are saying in some respects that that's what you mean, I can't accept it, because if there is a consciousness, super consciousness, if you like, if there's a super consciousness manipulating Tony Fasudo, and I wish I'd used a different word for a different phraseology, because manipulation of Tony Fasudo makes me really uncomfortable. That furnishes some unfortunate images and imagery in my mind. If there is a super consciousness behind or within Tony Fasudo and making for Tony Fasudo behave one way, and there's another super consciousness behind Tayo Boya making Tayo Boya behave in another way, that would tend more towards a virtual world, not a simulation. A simulation, I think, is where you set properties, you set characteristics, you set the environment, you wind it up, and then you let it go. That, to me, is what I mean by simulation. And I think that is actually the proper definition of it.
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah. That is what simulation theory seems to say. Basically, we are all in this simulation that's created for us, I suppose, and we are just computer code running in this simulation. So we think we're sentient, we think we're having this conversation, but we're only playing out a computer program that has scope to be flexible and think elaborately, but in reality, we are still, in essence, possibly a simulation. That's what simulation theory seems to contend with. Whereas I'm not of that opinion. I feel that the consciousness element, has more a part to play. It's part of the outside of this simulation. So it rather than simulation, we say virtual world, and we play a part, and we play in this virtual world, but from the outside in, unaware that we're outside.
Unaware that we're outside, what exactly?
The virtual world.
Yes,
we are in the world.
If we move away from all this sort of technical language of virtual world and simulation and
virtual was like a big computer program. And someone once said that if this was a simulated universe, there wouldn't be enough computational power to do it. However, that I don't personally think that the universe is rendered, so to speak, which is computer terms of drawing a picture on the screen. It's not there all the time. It's built as you observe it. So we are in a small bubble, which is our virtual world. And as soon as we move further, those boundaries grow. And what we leave behind either freezes and doesn't run. So that example that people say, if a tree falls in a forest, did it make a sound? No, it didn't make a sound, because there's no one there to hear it. It's only when it's observed does it make a sound, because that's the idea behind the game, so that a human or animal or creature sees it, it's part of the programming, so it has to play out. But if there's no one present, then it doesn't do anything. It hasn't actually needed to be done because there's no one present to observe it. We get that same amazing scenario when we observe particles. Now, we all know this. This is an actual test that's
I'm
done
going to
by
have to jump in
science.
here. Before you go on your particles and things, this is just breathtaking leaps of logic from one tiny island, one tiny oasis of brief and momentary clarity, and then this huge leap across vast chasms of churning lunacy, and then you land, with a tiny foothold on another little tiny piece of momentary sanity, and another big, huge. Look, I gotta take you all the way back to just your fundamental statements here, man.
Go on.
You feel that this and you feel that. I'm going to borrow. I always forget his name. You've reminded me of his name a million times, and every time I forget.
Bryson DeGrassi.
No. The Jewish lad who speaks very, very quickly.
Oh, the guy in the States who's got his own show. Oh,
anyway, him.
Yes, he's a guy who does a show, and he just talks way too fast. He's quite right wing in his views, but he's very, very, very fast speaker, and he's horrible. But hey, that's just my opinion.
I don't think he's got interesting views. Basically the best statement I think has ever come out of his mouth is reality doesn't care about your feelings. Facts don't care about your opinions. So you might feel this sort of thing, but I'm always bringing you back to this fundamental question. What have you observed to make you feel that what you're saying is factual?
Okay.
For instance, if a tree falls over, does it displace air?
You would have thought so, yeah.
If it displaces air, it's causing vibrations in the air.
Yep.
Vibrations in the air is what we call noise.
Yep.
So if a tree falls over in the forest, it makes noise.
If one's there, how do we know?
Let me roll that back. That's bad language.
Okay.
It makes sound. It makes a sound. Yep. It doesn't make any noise because there's no one there to qualify that sound as being noise.
Okay, it's just a vibration, correct?
It makes sound. Sound is pressure waves against our eardrums. So again, noise is pressure waves against our eardrums.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's producing pressure waves, and why wouldn't it? Therefore, it produces sound. It doesn't produce noise because it's not hitting anybody's eardrums, but it does produce a sound. Now, you would say, because of this, I forget the name of the gentleman now.
Who?
Somebody's uncertainty principle. Heidenberg? Who is it again?
I don't know.
Heidenberg, somebody's uncertainty principle. And it's something that I just felt in my physics class that, there are certain levels of intellectual exercise where people bind themselves up and get themselves into a bind and end up saying quite nonsensical things. And one of these nonsensical things is by somebody's uncertainty principle is that if you put a cat into a box, when you close the box, you don't know if the cat is still there or not.
That's Schrodinger's.
Was it Schroeder? Right. No, Schroeder's on principle, right?
Yeah, the Schrodinger's cat, yes.
Okay,
Schrodinger's cat, yeah.
Schrodinger's cat. No, sorry, it wasn't Heidenberg, whatever his name was.
Yeah.
I think the uncertainty principle was you can't measure both the velocity and the direction of spin of an electron. It's one or the other. There's something like that in physics. It's what been a long time ago, I don't remember. But Schrodinger's cat, just like, what are you talking about? Okay, the cat is in there. Has anybody ever put a cat into a box, closed the box, opened it up, and not found the freaking cat?
He's not saying that. He was saying that is the cat dead or not? Wasn't it? How do you know? You just make an assumption. You haven't observed it. Okay, let me ask you a question. I didn't understand the Schrodinger's principle. Maybe I just didn't understand the principle. Schrodinger's cat, yeah.
I don't understand it. It's always possible with Tayo. but to me, I thought they said with the uncertainty is that you don't know if the cat is there or not there or dead or So I was just like, well, you open up the freaking thing. Has anybody ever put a cat into a box?
It wasn't literal. He was saying.
No, I'm saying
thought experiment.
Thought experiment. Close the lid, open it up. Is the cat dead? Have you ever done that? What would kill it? I don't get it. It's just like, let's stop being stupid, man. No, let's be realistic about this. The cat is fine.
Okay.
Leave it in an airless box for half an hour. Yeah, I don't feel very unwell. But certainly it's going to be there, because one of the things about the universe that I like to say is that it's mechanistic. And it's a word that I thought I had invented, and I saw it somewhere else, which was quite annoying. I thought I had coined the phrase. It's mechanistic. That is to say, you can trust that if A and B and C happen in this order for these causes, and then you could recreate those causes, A and B and C will happen again.
See, that's the thing. You see, you've actually hit on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the universe was truly random,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't get order in the state that we find it.
Agreed.
You're seeing order, and you're seeing things occur in all. I mean, the four, what's it called? The four fundamental forces. What were they? There was the gravity, the weak force, the strong force, and electromagnetism. They're constant.
And they're very finely tuned.
Sorry, they're in tune, yeah.
They're very finely tuned.
Finely tuned, sorry, yes.
A little bit more strong force, and the universe would collapse in on itself. A little bit more weaker force, and the universe would just disband itself into nothingness, and so like that. And it's the anthropological principle, which is something that the scientists who believe in the materialists, who don't believe that there's anything but the materials in this world, it makes them extremely uncomfortable, because it begins to look like there is an intelligent designer behind the universe, because it's fabulously unlikely that the forces you mentioned would have the particular values that are just perfect and just exactly what is needed in order to make this a cohesive and sensible universe, and not a random chaos. Which is why they developed the ridiculous notion of a multiverse, because all the other universes are in chaos. We just happen to be in the one that isn't.
No, but that's actually a good point on the topic we're talking about. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Based on that theory, because if we are a simulation or a virtual environment, then that virtual environment must have been put in place by a programmer of some sort. Now, you can call him a deity, you can call him whatever you like, or he or she, it, you don't know. But it created or put this computer program together. Now, we may revere it and think that's a god, but it could be just a young lad in a computer room, and he's kicked off this simulation. And the universe is his simulation. Now, if it is a computer program that we're all part of, then it stands to reason that he could kick off more than one, just to tweak little bits here and there, just to see how his code will operate. Now, for you and I, the universe is, in this realm, we believe it's 14 billion years old. But some of the others, he could have kick-started it and stopped it.
I don't believe it's 14 billion years old.
Well, if you're saying that, then that goes to the reason to say that we are in a simulated environment, because that 14 billion is only become clear when we look for it and we assume it is. We've got no real 100% way of confirming it. We're close, but it could be part of the simulation to make it look that it's that long.
The idea of the age of the universe, the numbers behind the age of the universe have been increasing since I was a young boy. When I was very small, I don't know why I know this as a small boy of, say, about 5 or 6 years old, but for some reason, I seem to remember that the universe was about 350 million years old. And then as I grew older, the universe aged. And it became older, I think in the 70s. It became about 1 billion years old in the early 70s. And then after that, it's sometime in the 80s, I believe, it became 13 point something. Actually, I remember, I think it was 12 billion first. And then it came finally tuned down to about 13.5 billion years old.
Right.
The reason for the growth in the age of the universe is not for discoveries made, which confirm any of this. It's for a realization of how long the minimum amount of time it would take for random events to turn from hydrogen into mankind. So it was evolution theory that drove the age of the universe and still drives it till today.
Okay, well, that's a slightly different topic, isn't it?
There is no actual provable data out there. Maybe starlight, distant starlight is, to me, distant starlight is far and away the biggest problem that people like me who don't believe in the age of the universe is the problem we have. But there's so many assumptions that go into it that we really have to, there's great reason to have some kind of doubt about it. But I will accept that they're very distant stars, and on the face of it, it would have taken starlight a long time to reach us, making the universe older than, let us say, conservative Christians who believe the universe is 6,000 years old. From that point of view, you can ask, how was the universe, if you believe in simulation theory, how is it being simulated? Because it's the same problem that the simulator has that even a deity would have. And this is where the Christians and the Jews and the Muslims, they run into this issue that, okay, how would God have created the universe and accounted for distant starlight? What did he create? See, the idea of creating light in transit is very problematic, because it would mean that an exploding star would have been created with the explosion in transit, the light from the explosion in transit, even though the star hasn't really exploded yet. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. But all you're doing now is just reflecting on the size of the universe or what have you.
No,
That's that
simulation theory. Like, how would you simulate the distant starlight? How would the simulator solve the distant starlight problem? It's not just a problem for God.
Yeah, okay,
it's a problem for the programmer, whoever the programmer is.
Why? We can do that now.
No, you can't. You don't understand. The light now, okay, let's take a star that's 100,000 years away. So if you're saying that the simulator created that, every photon of light has to be in transit, every single photon.
Right.
Yeah, for 100,000 years or something.
Okay.
Do
you see a film on TV and it looks really real?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So we have been fooled by just a TV film or a film or that it looks real. Our senses would otherwise think it's real, but we know it's just some actors. But a lot of people, a minority of them, are easily fooled and think that some of it is real.
How does that account? How does that
stop my problem? What I'm trying to say is, it doesn't take a great leap to show that our senses can be fooled. I mean, Elon Musk actually said it quite simply. He said, in just the period of 40 years, we went from a Pong game. Remember those old Pong games? If our listeners here don't know what that is, if you go and search for Pong, it was one of the first video games. And literally, it was two sticks on a black screen that used to ping. Yep, like that. And we have gone from that to now games which are like in virtual reality mode, where you put glasses on and you can see stuff and you feel you're in the game. So that's in 40 years. So what's to say in a couple of 100 years, we cannot tell if something is simulated or something is real. So in that short time span,
because your quantum displacement won't tally. All sorts of things won't work because they're not real.
But don't you understand? We could be just a mind in the game. Even when we think our physical body.
When we measure stuff, I mean, this is the basis of science.
Yeah.
When we measure stuff, it all tallies, it all adds up.
Yeah. Because the instruments are in the game.
Well, that's now, this is you going back into your conspiracy stronghold. If you think like that, Tony, it's very, very, very dangerous, step you've taken, because that leads to tinfoil hat time, and the earth is flat. I mean,
no, not
yeah,
at all.
yeah, because you're saying you can't trust your senses. That's actually what you're saying.
Because your senses can be easily fooled.
Well, your senses being fragile is one thing, but not trusting in them is something else.
No, I didn't say not trusting them. I said they could be fooled.
Yeah, but no, you're saying, well, it's the same thing, isn't it? Because if you can be fooled, you can't put absolute faith in your senses. This is why some pilots sort of fly them planes into the ground. They're trusting their senses, even though the instruments are telling them that something's wrong. So there are times when you need feedback from an external source to verify your senses. But you're saying no, even that feedback is suspect.
Yes.
And this is why I'm saying, if you think like that, it's tin hat time.
I'm not saying it's tin hat or should be just dismissed, because there's no way of proving or disproving. It's just a theory.
I'm trying to say that there's a way that even a simulator, a super intelligent simulator, would have problems achieving certain things. And I'm talking about achieving light from distant stars. It's not just a problem for the people who believe in God and 6,000 years. It's also a problem for simulators, unless you're saying that the simulation is running for billions of years. If that's what you're saying, well, that's an easy win for you then. But I don't think that's what you're saying.
Well, you've got to understand this, right? You understand this. If there is something creating the simulation, they can pause it at any time. We're not aware of it because we're in it. They can pause it, restart it, push it forward, repeat it. They can do what they like. Us in the simulation won't ever know that because we're in the simulation.
That's actually a very interesting point. I think I'm going to have to share that with some of these people from RATE, from the RATE project. I think I have an email from them somewhere, an email address. It's quite interesting, but I don't think it will accept it. But the RATE program is trying to measure the age of the Earth. It's conservative Christians who are using science to challenge the conventional notion of the age of the Earth. And their program is RATE. It's called RATE. And what you've just said now is quite fascinating. If you think there is a deity and he created the universe, so he created it and then he speeded up the universe, you see. He speeded things up, by, hundreds of thousands or millions or billions or trillions of a factor of trillions, and got everything ready, and then slowed it back down to normal, and then started us off again. So there'd be little difference between such a deity and your simulator.
Yes.
Your simulation master or mistress.
Absolutely. But the deity doesn't even need to be an all-powerful being. It's somebody running a code. An alien.
Because we use computers now, that you guys keep on thinking about computers.
No, but I'm trying to.
The first person was 400 BC, was it? A Chinese philosopher said something about, how do we know we are not the dream of a butterfly?
Yes.
Right?
But we don't know.
In his time, that idea of a dream would have been the imagery he used. We use the imagery now of a computer because that's what we're familiar with.
Yes.
But I just don't understand why it has to be computerized. Why does it have to be a computer?
I think it's because simulation is linked to computer.
Well, why can't it be virtual rather than a simulation?
Well, a similar thing. I mean, they can cross boundaries for sure.
No, but there's no computer involved. I mean, if this, to me, this is a virtual reality. It was created, and another thing about any computer type of thing is just as it is, as a thing in itself.
Okay.
And I believe, my belief system is that this is a playground and we come to play. We are the consciousness, whatever that is. By the way, that's an interesting concept in itself. Well, we don't even know what the heck what consciousness is.
Yes.
And it would be wonderful to find out one day. I don't know exactly what it is. We might be the consciousness or whatever is conscious.
Well, that you see, this is all hard. It's all the questions that we don't have an answer to. But there are some things that are really strange. For instance, why is it that particles, that experiment that they do,
Mhm.
why is it when particles are not observed, they behave a certain way? But as soon as you observe them, they act a totally different way.
How do we know how they behave when we're not observing them?
Because when you're not observing them, you see the end result, and the end result shows it was a wave. So the end result is different.
So
The two slit test.
when you're going to observe it, the end result is different. When you observe it, the end result is something else.
The end result is different, yes. And
isn't it then because the instruments that you're using to observe it is interfering with it?
So that means our eyes interfere with it, do they?
No, the instrument, whatever.
No, but our eyes do the same. It comes out the same as
Hold on.
observed with the instrument. It's only when no one is observing
Did you say
it.
particles?
Yep.
Are you
Photons.
trying to tell me that any human has got the magnification factor in their eyes that they can see particles?
No.
Oh, so what do you mean?
You see the end result, and the end result shows that it's a particle, because the end result ends up as a particle because you're observing it.
I don't think you're accurate in what you're saying, sir.
Well,
because it doesn't make any sense. First of all, what is the experiment? So do you know enough about it to share the experiment?
I will quickly look it up here. I've got it before because I've studied this before, and I was absolutely gobsmacked by the way that this actually works. And the experiment is done many times, repeated many times, and as soon as you interfere, so you're looking at the experiment, that you then see the way it behaves, and it changes its way it behaves.
I have this great skepticism for a lot of sort of modern science, which I think is a pile of poo. And one of the things that I'm very skeptical about is this so-called double split experiment of the wavelight of a photon of light of a photon.
Okay.
Sometimes photons behave as particles, and sometimes they behave as waves. Correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And they always draw it with a slit in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
You got two slits, and what happens when a photon of light passes through? Now, I have never had anyone explain to me what the material of that slit of the wall, what the material of the wall is and how big the slits are, because they make it seem like it's some kind of like a homogeneous, uniform surface. But when you come down to the level of photons, you're dealing with atoms and protons and neutrons and electrons. So what kind of slit? Do you understand what I'm saying? It'll never be a homogeneous surface. It's going to be actually a whole bunch of, if you were to draw it to scale, it'll be a whole bunch of energy centers whizzing around. And so why wouldn't that interfere with your photon? It's not a slit. When they say slit, it doesn't make any sense. It's at our macro level, yeah, but at the level of a photon, it's definitely not a slit. It's really a gap between electrons, the atoms and the particles. Why isn't it represented like that? And what is the effect of sending a photon past these active particles? Why wouldn't there's not so much questions? Why would it behave like this? Why wouldn't it? You're interfering with the blooming thing, and I've never heard anyone
behaves. That's what's really strange.
I'm not surprised. Are you surprised? Because you're straining the blooming. It's just like pouring water through a large faucet or pouring it through two small funnels, and then thinking it's going to behave the same. Why would it? You're interfering with the blooming thing.
Well, you're not, but you're observing it. This is what the phenomena is. It's really bizarre.
Observation aside.
Anyway, this quirk, let's call it a quirk, right, of nature.
I'm not accepting the quirk of nature. You haven't proven your case. I've asked you a question. You just said put it aside. No,
I'm just saying it's just a small example of why it behaves the way it does. It's to do with some of these other forces that they're so uniform. This is just another quirk, and it adds ammunition to my theory that we are in a simulation, and it's only created up until the expanse of our knowledge. As we go further, it grows as a computer program goes. Because if you're in a computer game, the whole game isn't rendered. It's only if you go through the levels, and as you go through the levels, those games are rendered following a series of code. And they follow it. Okay, once this person gets to this level, this code kicks in. The same in the reality we're seeing all around us. We only see so far because that's all that's needed to be created around us.
So what do
As
you
we go
want? You just
beyond
want
that,
the entire universe to just open up just because you're curious. I mean, how does that work? I can't know the contents of another person's mind just because I'm curious about it.
well, okay,
It
here's
takes
a question for
effort.
you that can you answer. Are you the only one in your simulation?
I don't even accept there is a simulation.
No,
The way
but if you were, think about it. Are you the only conscious being? Are we all simulations around you? You are the only one.
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't know what I can prove about it.
Exactly.
I
It's
used
not provable.
when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I used to delight myself in torturing my long-suffering lecturers by posing this question: can you prove I, Tayo, am not God?
No.
And it's basically the same thing you're asking. You can't prove that I am not God, because if you say, "Well, do something," I just say I refuse to kowtow to
Yeah,
your base curiosities.
indeed.
Yeah, but that was just a teenager spouting nonsense. What I'm trying to say is that we should have grown out of that by now, and we shouldn't be talking like this because because we're not supposed to be spouting teenage crap, man. We're supposed to be saying, making sense of these things. You say basically you've just said in a very sort of roundabout way. The more we look into things, the more we learn. Are you surprised?
Okay. Let me give you something. There's a guy called Bostrom who came out with an argument about simulation and the hypothesis behind it. And he gave these simple examples. Okay. He said, there's one of three is true. Okay. All civilizations, be they intelligent, not just us, but anywhere in the universe, if there are any, will go extinct before reaching technological maturity. So they'll become extinct before they even get to the levels in order to create a simulation. Okay, so that's number one. You have to park that for a moment. Number two, all civilizations lose interest in advanced computer simulations. So even though they get to the stage of technical maturity to create these things, they don't bother. They think, nah, why waste time to create these really complex simulations? What's the point? The third one is these civilizations do build these simulations. And that means there's a high probability we are in a simulation. We are just one of those simulations that civilizations that have gone before us, have chosen to create, to maybe look at their history. We are them, but in thousands of years' time, millions even, but they don't know how we have behaved. So they create this simulation of us to see and observe how their forefathers existed, and they're simulating it. If we can simulate, now going back, that silly example, but we're creating games now. We are reaching or getting close to a technological maturity. And we're still not there yet, but we're not far away. We can create simulated environments that mimic real life. And if that is the case, then we can't, it's not a great leap of faith to envisage that could then mean we could create a simulated environment and run programs within it. We do already. There's science already uses supercomputers to simulate how proteins behave or how viruses behave or how all sorts of things behave. And they throw computational power at it to simulate, to see all the different permutations that could come out. So what's to say that our human generations in the future have not decided to create a simulation of us to understand what we did to our planet, for instance.
I think one thing is the idea that time is probably linear and time travel is probably impossible. That's one thing. But more importantly, I think because I don't believe there's any way or chance, hell on earth, ice cube in hell, of us ever simulating consciousness, especially since we don't even know what it is. And consciousness is at the heart, the core of our experience as sentient beings. In fact, it's one of my personal strongest arguments for, sorry to bring it up again, very sorry, audience, one of my strongest arguments for reincarnation. Because if we are just, arguments against materialism, if we are just materials, we are just matter and nothing else, then what exactly is it that knows? What part of me actually knows? Which carbon atom in my brain knows, or which group of carbon atoms in my brain know that I'm looking at an image now on my screen of Tony Fusulo? And what is the qualitative difference between those atoms and any other carbon atoms? My argument is that there's absolutely no difference between the carbon atoms in my brain I recognize as Tony Fusulo and the carbon atoms in a lump of charcoal. Now, that's not to say that Tyre is as stupid as a lump of charcoal. It's not where.
I'll leave that to the audience to come to their own conclusions.
That's not where my argument is going. What I'm trying to say is that qualitatively, the two bunches of atoms, of carbon atoms, are just carbon. So, what other quality does the one in my brain have that makes it recognize Tony Fusulo? And I'm saying there is no such quality that the atom itself has. The arrangement of atoms in my brain is akin to the arrangement of atoms in a television. It allows for the reception of a signal, but the signal does not emanate from the television or from the radio or from the phone. The signal comes from an intelligence, a consciousness. And that's my idea of virtual reality. But when you come down to when you say, what is the source of information in the universe? Where is the physical source of information in the universe? The answer is there isn't one. And that is why I find the materialist argument of modern evolutionist theory and science laughable. You can't explain the source of information. Where did DNA is information? It's a packaging of information. Where did that information come from? It's just accidentally rolled together the books of Shakespeare. In fact, I don't even like that analogy. The DNA is actually an instruction set. It gives the environment, parts of the environment that can read it, it gives them instructions on how to build proteins. Now, the proteins speak a language which is, from a point of view of being complicated, is so mind-bogglingly complicated because the language of proteins, believe it or not, is shapes. Can you imagine communicating to people through shapes? It's pretty amazing until you think to yourself, letters on a page are shapes, and you recognize the shapes. And because of the shapes, you can extract information from the page.
But that's just the learning, isn't it? We're getting to see shapes.
I don't think you should use the word just in a conversation like this.
No, okay. It's not. It's a wonderful feat of whatever. It's amazing. But I'm still saying it could. I mean, going back to right at the beginning, I said about our consciousness, whatever that consciousness is, it's not part of this realm, this world or existence that we see. It's external. So we could be in a simulation, but not a simulation, a virtual world. But we can manipulate that world with our consciousness.
Well, first of all, I think we've made some progress because I think you agree we're not talking about a simulation per se when we're talking about a virtual world with our consciousness in it.
Yes, but even that in itself is mind-blowing because we think that this is existence, but existence is part of a simulation. So we're interacting in this existence.
I think you just said something that, sorry, how did we get back to simulation again?
Well, I'm using the word as a virtual world.
Oh,
It's yeah.
all right.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that we're in this virtual world because I mean, there's so many things. This then points to some influence from elsewhere, or it's the influence from us. Our consciousness is making that reality that we see in this virtual world. Because how many times have you had coincidences that are mind-boggling that happen to you, or you see a situation, you think, I've seen that before, a bit like deja vu. It's like, what the heck is that? See, that seems really odd for things like that to happen. I know you say, oh, it could be probability, but then if you're saying it's probability, then everything is probable. Do you see what I mean? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it's as clear cut as that. But I think we can steer this. I'm going to say simulation because it makes sense, but it's a virtual world by our consciousness. So we think we're
partly. I think I would imagine. I mean, no matter how much consciousness you bring to bear, it's really difficult to fight like Superman. As much as most of us would love to, there do seem to be some rules, fundamental
well,
rules.
that's what I mean. There's rules to make the program work. It's what I was saying before. The four fundamental forces, they're there to make the program work. If some laws and weren't in place, then the whole program would fall in a heap. So there's some rules that are in place to make the program work. If they weren't, then it would be completely doolally, although some people do try and make it doolally. But there are some rules to make it actually work. Or the other side of it is, do you know what? I'm talking complete tosh. This is not a simulation. It's not a virtual world. It is just the world, and we are in it. But still, this consciousness, I still think, is steering us in this world. But I am still, the jury's still out as to why we do have these rules in place in a purely random universe, so to speak. I can't see those being a rule. Why do we have an atom that's at the other end of the universe that behaves exactly the same as, it's got the same forces on it that the ones that we have here?
How do we know that that's true?
No, but that we everything we've seen and observed in our near space, near universe, we've been able to tell that the properties of it are the same. It's these forces. The gravity works the same. We can calculate that mathematically. So that is a force that's constant wherever. So why is that when these bodies aren't near one another?
Isn't it the same mathematical modelers who say that the universe came out of nothing?
Well, that breaks down when you have a singularity, yes. But then maths breaks down there anyway. It works for most of the time.
So what singularity? Has anybody ever seen a singularity?
No, but that's what the maths dictates. But then we know it goes wrong at those really small levels.
Okay, so I'm not prepared to take mathematical modeling for anything that doesn't tally with common sense. Because
no, because it works in 99.999999999 however numbers.
Like I said, for anything that doesn't make sense. So if mathematical modeling talks nonsense, I'm going to assume it's nonsense until I've got further data. So facts and evidences sounds like nonsense. I'm pretty sure it's nonsense. Ergo, for now, it's nonsense. So singularities and things like that, and the universe popping into existence from out of nothing for no good reason. And when there's nothing. Was that
when the program was started?
Well, I'm talking about the mathematics now.
Okay.
The people who claim that there's math, because I can't follow their math. I mean, this is really advanced level mathematics. So they know that people like me can't follow their mathematics, and they're free to say that it says whatever they wanted to say. I can't challenge the notion.
They do get it peer checked by other people who also.
I don't trust those people because all of them believe in evolution. So I'm very sorry. I don't take them as serious human beings. They believe in nonsense, and their word means absolutely nothing to me. I can't communicate to you, Tony, and to the audience just how much contempt I hold for scientists who call themselves scientists who say they believe in macroevolution. I utter and total contempt. That's what I have in my heart for them, because that's not what science, that's not the scientific method. Talks about observation and repeatable experiments, repeatable experiments and testable hypotheses and observation. And they say it's science, but those three things I mentioned are not part of macroevolution. And that's the problem. Now, why are you calling it science when it isn't science? So to get back to the simulation thing and everything, I think there's good reason to feel that something else is going on in the universe, because when you examine the edges, you see I think you may have touched on this yourself. When you look at, I think the way you put it was our near experience. Quite early on in the show, you used a phrase like near experience, and I was quite impressed because that's putting into a nutshell what I'm trying to say now, and that is, in our everyday experience, in our near experience, the universe makes sense. But when you think about the edges, not this way you mean exactly, but when you get to the extremes, it seems to break down. For instance, a very common example, language. Where the hell do languages come from?
Wow.
Why we have all these languages. We see languages dying, and we don't notice new ones being born. Now, language changes. But
yes,
what we call English
can be explained quite
what we call English now has a historical thread going back thousands of years. I think all the way back to the Romans and possibly before.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the problem is certain forms of language in the meantime. I mean, Cornish, for instance. There's only a handful of people left who speak Cornish.
You need to explain where that is if there's listeners here not from the UK.
Cornish is the native language of an area here
in the
UK called Cornwall. And you can understand that the people of Cornwall spoke Cornish. At one time, it was very, very popular, and it was prevalent in Cornwall. A lot of people spoke Cornish. Now there are, if I remember properly, fewer than a dozen speakers. And I'm not even sure they even, is written down or recorded or anything. And when they die, the language dies. I think in Africa, the language is dying all the time.
But what does that mean, though? What you're trying to say? That's just...
but if there were at one time more languages than there are now, where did they come from? Because what we haven't seen in the thousands of years that linguists have been looking at human speech and everything, is we haven't seen the birth of a new language. The system is running down, in other words.
I think let's give an example here. If we were to take a group of children, who are 2 or 3 years of age, and as a social experiment, we put them in an isolated area. We provided them the food, the warmth that they needed, but they grew in isolation. Are you telling me that they wouldn't have developed a language amongst themselves to communicate? Even rudimentary terms, grunts, sounds, of course they would. And the whole point of having multitude of languages is to communicate simple things to the person next to you. Now, in a small community, you will have different dialects to someone who had to travel further away, because traveling was not around. The only way to move around was either on a horse or walking. And so you're only limited to a short sort of distance. Now, as people started to move more, horses, making inventions of trains and carts and things, people started to spread more, and languages started to be mixed, and so they would amalgamate. You'd have equality between the languages. I mean, look at us and the American language now. When they first started out, the Brits went over to the States and they picked up a lot of our words, but they didn't pick them all up. They had some words that they'd come up with themselves. So because they were further away than Britain. But now the world as a whole is intertwined because of the internet and travel and planes. Yeah, we're focusing on more spoken languages, the ones that are more prevalent, so they're going to be the dominant ones. The lesser languages are going to fade to the wayside. So that's just a normal process that you can see how it's, I'm going to use the word evolving, because it does. It's changed where there's some languages no longer spoken, no need to. where you're speaking with a language that's spoken by a larger group. So guess what? You're going to take that on board. It's beneficial for your survival.
What you'd have expected is that you'd find clumps of people who have been isolated for a while speaking a novel language. From that, well, the point is that they don't. The point is that they speak a language that's always been there in the history of that group. We don't find a new language. Now, if you say
the scenario I've given you, if we were to put children at birth that had no contact with anyone else, there would be a new language.
We've never been able to have a group of children put together, but we have had children found who have been brought up by wolves, and well, at least I remember the wolves. I don't know if they've been brought up by anybody else, any other creature.
Yeah.
This is in India, of course, during the Victorian era. I think it was based. That is the person I'm thinking of was the inspiration for Mowgli and Jungle
Book. Yeah.
Yes, and another. That was a male, and then there was a female in America who went missing in the woods, and she was found eventually, and they call them feral children, don't they? And the thing, and there's another feral boy in New York State in America too. And the thing about it is that their capacity for language is severely impacted by their experience. The trouble is, obviously, that they were growing up with animals. But the impact to the ability to grasp our language was so great that they never fully spoke language properly.
Yeah.
So when you say that if you put a whole bunch of children together, they will eventually form a language of sorts, we don't know that that's necessarily true based on some flimsy, but nevertheless existent and extant evidence. So that's where linguists are coming from, that in all honesty, we can't really explain the appearance of the invention of language.
I'm not convinced with that one. I'll be honest with you.
Okay, fair enough. Then another one I can think about, then maybe will convince you, is we think about the origins of mankind, of life.
Okay.
When you go far back, you start asking, you ask the question, where did we come from? Now, if you're going to say that we grew from slime, and then slime became worms, and then worms became, I don't know, what was it, amphibians?
Yeah.
All right, you do that.
It's that first bit. It's the first bit that everyone has a problem with.
I actually have a problem with much later on. The first man and the first woman, because I believe they were created, you see. I don't believe I don't believe in evolution, so obviously I don't believe that we came from slime.
So if that case then, if they were created, then you would believe more.
The day they arrived. What did that look like?
So are you saying that there was humans placed on the earth as like
I'm saying that as offensive as it is to my logic, and I'm pretty sure to yours too, the best I can come up with is there was a rustling in the bushes and a man and a woman stepped out.
So what put them there?
Yeah, good question.
You don't have an answer.
I haven't the foggiest, mate.
So do you not simulation? This is now going into the realms of, that would actually, what you're saying, if that is your belief system, that would actually add more credence to this virtual or simulation environment if they just appeared. That means somebody or something put them there.
I agree.
And equally, if they were put there, then the whole Earth situation, universe situation adds more power to that. It is simulated. This is a simulated environment.
Why is the full moon the same size as the sun? Why do we have an eclipse of the sun like that? I mean, it's so flipping odd, man. If the odds, we take it as our due, but really it's like being delivered. Every time it happens, it's like we're taking delivery of a winning lottery ticket from out of nowhere.
Yep.
Why is the moon the same size as the sun in the sky?
Well,
because it just happens to be 400 times smaller than the sun, and it's placed 400 times, what is it now? 1/400th of the distance to the sun.
It does vary, because
Yeah,
sometimes
but
it does pass the sun and it's smaller and vice versa. So it's
yeah,
not
well,
quite
I did
exact.
actually say eclipse, full eclipse.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, isn't that just a little bit like, your simulation there, dude? You kind of gave away that you're there. If you were trying to hide, because we look at it and go, that's a bit nice, isn't it? That's a bit convenient.
Well, it's a lot of things a bit convenient. This is what I'm saying. There's so many things out there that just are convenient. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. This then adds more fuel to the fire that we are in a virtual environment, that these are rules that were placed to make the virtual environment behave the way it does. We are in that virtual environment and we can affect it in certain ways. And we're here. We don't know why we're here, but we're here maybe to learn, to adapt, to change. I don't know. We don't know the answer. So these are things.
Yeah, why is Theresa May here?
Listen, we're getting close to the end of the show. Do you have any final comment to add before we wrap up?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit. I think, from the point of view of simulation theory, I am completely not convinced. But from the point of view of information, the source of information is not in the physical universe. And therefore, there is something other than the physical universe. And if you want to call that virtual reality or that we're in a virtual reality, I think that's just something that we can come to, we can conclude on our own without any sort of major doubts in our mind. So yeah, I absolutely 100% believe that this is a virtual reality. I don't believe for a second that this is it. This is all there is.
And indeed, that then postulates that you're coming back.
I don't know why you're so happy about it, Tony. I don't know what I've done to you, man. You don't feel like a friend any longer.
Because you keep saying the lucky ones die first. Well, why do you say that you're coming back?
The lucky ones do die first. And, who knows? They come back again. And then, I don't know. It's too horrible to think about all the time.
Oh, dear. Okay, we can't carry on there. We really have reached the end of a show for another week.